A very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 13th Mindmine Summit. We'll be starting shortly, so kindly bear with us. A humble request to please put your handsets into silent mode or switch them off. Thank you. very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. All those who are standing, it's a humble request to please be seated. We are starting with the summit. Once again, all those who are standing, a humble request to please be seated. We're about to start. Also, if your handsets are on the loud mode, kindly switch them on the silent mode or switch them off. Thank you. A very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It has to be with the Delhi zest. Good morning. All right. To secure its status as one of the three dominant economies of the world in the coming decade, India needs to use all the levers that make it a great democracy, whether it is diversity, geography, demographics, or ethnicity. A very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Hero Enterprise, I would like to welcome you all to the 13th edition of the Mindmine Summit. The new decade, one nation, multiple destinies. The theme of our 2019 edition will not only assess the onset impact of various structural reforms undertaken, but also explore their efficacy in the coming decade. Please join me in giving a huge round of applause to our presenting partner. Can we have a round of applause for all our partners? ICICI Lombard, Principal Partner, Kotak Mutual Fund. Country Partner is Royal. Summit Partner, Jan Small Finance Bank. Innovation Partner, Escorts. Knowledge Partner, KPMG. Associate Partners, Excite, Aditya Capital, American Oncology Institute, SBI Mutual Funds, Avendus. Session Partners, Bain Capital, Petronas, PNB MetLife, Barclays, ICICI Prudentials, Rockman Industries, Tata Capital. Technology Partner, IBM. Policy Partner, Pehle India Foundation. Academic Partner, BML Munjal University. Magazine Partner, Business World. Print Media, Business Standard. Electronic Partner, CNBC. Live Streaming, 360 Streaming Solutions. And Social Media, 45 Degrees. A huge thank you to all our partners. Yeah, we can set the tempo. So ladies and gentlemen, now I present to you a very special audiovisual to give you a summarized insight into the 12-year fabulous journey of the Mindmine Summit. Can we have a round of applause for this fabulous 12-year journey? So ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting shortly. We are just waiting for our chief guest. He's on the way. He'll arrive shortly. Until then, we have a fishbowl that will be circulated. In case you haven't dropped in your visiting cards, kindly do so. There's a lucky dip that happens for today and tomorrow. And one lucky winner is about to get something special, but by the end of the day. So if you have your visiting cards, we'll just rotate our fishbowl. Kindly drop in your visiting cards. And in a while, at the end of the day, we'll declare the winner. Thank you. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We have a fishbowl which is being rotated. I suggest all of you, in case you have your visiting cards, please drop in your visiting cards in the fishbowl. At the end of the day, a winner is going to be declared. The special lucky dip that happens at every Mindmine Summit, and you get something special as a prize. Once again, a huge thank you to all our partners. Presenting partner ICICI Lombard, principal partner Kotak Mutual Fund, country partner Israel, summit partner Jan Small Finance Bank, innovation partner Escorts, knowledge partner KPMG, associate partners Excite, Aditya Capital, American Oncology Institute, SBI Mutual Fund, event is session partners Bain Capital, Petronas, PNB MetLife. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming with a huge round of applause our chief guest, Honorable Minister of Electronics, IT and Law and Justice, Sri Ravi Shankar Prasad ji. Can we have a round of applause for sir? Welcome, sir. Also a huge round of applause for our chairman, Hero Enterprise, Mr. Munjal. Now I would request our Honorable Chief Guest, Shri Ravi Shankar Prasadji, Chairman Hero Enterprise, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, our Managing Director, Munjal Shova, Mr. Yogesh Munjal, Chairman Rockman Industries, Shri Suman Kant Munjal, Executive Director, Hero Enterprise, Ms. Shivali Munjal, and Deputy CEO, KPMG, Mr. Akhil Bansal, to kindly join us for the lamp lighting ceremony. Can we have a round of applause for all the dignitaries? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, sir. Mindmine Summit, an initiative of Hero Enterprise over the last decade, has fostered a plethora of dialogue, debates, and deliberations in the understanding the conundrum-cutting association of the Mindmine Summit. Welcome, sir.
That was a rather weak show of hands. Thank you. Ravi Shankar Prasadji, most welcome. We consider you very much a part of the Mindmine Institute. This is the fourth time you're with us today, and we truly appreciate both your encouragement and your engagement with us in an open conversational dialogue. As you're aware, this initiative was started 13 years ago, and over the last 12 years, it has achieved something which is unusual, which is the ability to build a platform where leaders from all walks of life are able to come in and have a conversational interaction amongst themselves as also with the audience. And these are leaders from all walks of life, from industry, from government, from politics, from civil society, academics, artists, literally across the board. We have diplomats, and we've discussed subjects as wide as agriculture, water, technology, the geopolitics, how Indians and India's global relations are getting impacted with what we are doing, the possibilities and challenges facing us. And if I look at just one category, which is political leaders, we've had leaders from across the board in India, all the way from the extreme left to leaders like D. Raja and Sitaram Yechuri, to Advani ji, to Anand Sharma, to kind of environment that's got built around this think tank. We want to use this to give feedback to those who matter, those who are the decision makers, those who are the policy makers. So once we finish in these 2 days, we will come back to you and to other leaders to look at what people are saying, what economists are saying, what industry is saying, to a very unique place. We are a country which is continental in every aspect of the world. We are not a country, we are actually a civilization. We are a nation which celebrated a young nation that celebrated its 73rd Independence Day. The very next day we had Eid, we have Janmashtami coming tomorrow. So we live in many centuries at one time. At the same time, the Chandrayaan left the Earth's orbit just a few days ago. All of these are realities of India. Yesterday evening, coming back from office, I actually got off the car and walked half the way because the roads were blocked. A mandir had been smashed by the civic authorities, and there was a protest taking place in the streets. So all of this is India. On the world stage, we are seen as amongst the emerging leaders in the world. At the same time, how do we address the needs of the 200 million people who still live in abject poverty, which is the single biggest challenge that we face as a nation today? You did something interesting, by the way, last time when you were here. You brought an actual copy of the Constitution of India, and you read out text of portions of it. And that was actually very fascinating because we all talk about it, but we don't often think enough about it. What did the Constitution writers, what did those who actually designed this actually mean? What were they saying? What were the implications for us as a nation? Because we are a true experiment in the making. There is no other country in the world which has given full civil liberties first and then has tried to build a market economy. We are truly an experiment in the making. The only country which comes even close to us is Poland today. They're trying to do somewhat like what India has been doing. No other country, not the US, not the UK, they didn't even have votes for women till only some time ago. So we are truly unique in that sense. Which is why the moment you tell people you can do this or cannot do this, people will stand up and protest. Because we are the world's most thriving and noisy democracy. Everybody has a voice and everybody wants to be heard. So how do you take into account all of these and at the same time keep moving forward? One is to focus on the long term, and I have to say there are some absolutely amazing things being done. The building blocks that have been being put in place today are absolutely fascinating. You yourselves are doing some of these. First, your charge is amazing. You've been involved in IT, in electronics, in lawmaking, in the system of justice in India, and you've spanned this with complete ease, all of these responsibilities. So would you tell us a little bit about what's going on there? This is one industry, especially the IT hardware industry, which is the world's largest manufacturing sector. It has the potential to create the highest multiplier in the economy. We are a big player there. How do we take a big forward leap in that area? I know that you've been encouraging things like telephone making, and we've come a long, long way from where we were. What's next? In our judicial system, we still have lakhs of cases pending in the courts. How do we ensure that justice is not there, but it's actually available and it's timely and it's at a cost where everybody can afford? Should we be looking at more alternative mechanisms? Should arbitration become more common and popular in India? Can India become the next arbitration center after Singapore, which is well established, and Malaysia, which is trying? Can we become the big player in this industry? Because it is a global industry again, arbitration. I understand there is some move for India to get involved, but how do we take a leap forward in this? On the economy front, when the Mindmine Summit started the first time, we were just about getting to be a 1 trillion economy. We are now already 3 trillion, and both the FM and the Prime Minister have given a forward-looking statement saying we will be a 5 trillion economy. Frankly, we are all absolutely excited about this prospect. I think this is a superb vision to set out. We do, however, also need to do things which will matter to the here and now, to the today. Because very often, people tend to focus only in the short term, and the current slowdown that has gripped the demand and consumption cycle is impacting not just the physical operation of companies, but also the mood. And as you know, for any turnaround, the first thing that has to change is the mood and the environment around the people. So would you enlighten us a little bit about how the government is thinking of making a quick change which could impact and show some quick wins in this area? Because we all both believe and agree that what we are doing for the long term is absolutely fantastic. We do need, however, a quick fix for some of the things, whether it's more movement in NBFCs, kickstarting some consumptionist demand so that productions go up and therefore investment comes back into the private sector. How can the public sector and the government play an even bigger role in infrastructure to start crowding in more investment from the private sector? On the social side, we have plenty of experiments going on right now in India. Can some of those be aligned also with our long-term national and economic goals? How do we align these? We are, of course, a country of many faiths, a country of many wants, a country of many desires. We are 1.3 billion people, and we are therefore 1.3 billion ideas. How do you align some of these for a quicker movement forward so that we are all pulling in one direction? We have the potential to be amongst the leaders in the world. We need to get back to the place we were and the place we deserve to be. Once again, a big thank you to you for being both a friend of the Mindmine, personal friend, and a big supporter of the forward movement that has been set for this nation over the last 20 years, which Prime Minister Modi has put a big booster on further to accelerate the pace of India moving forward. To all of you, a big thank you for coming in and being big supporters of the Mindmine Institute and what the Mindmine Summit does. And just to assure you that whatever gets discussed here does get collated and goes back into the system to provide feedback wherever it's actually relevant. We are also releasing 2 reports today with 2 of our partners, one with KPMG and one with Pele India, to look at different aspects of what's going on in India to demonstrate the intellectual aspect of the Mindmine Institute, and to tell you that it's not just intellectual, it's also intellectual which can actually make a difference to things that matter on the ground. Thank you very much, and may I now invite Ravi Shankar Prasad ji to give us his address.
My good friend, Mr. Sunil Muljal, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy I could make it again this time. Sunil was in Thailand, he asked me I have to come. And I was on my 2-day tour to Bangalore to meet a lot of my IT obligations there. And I had to reschedule my program. I'm leaving in the evening now, because I also didn't want to miss the Mindmine Summit, which began as an initiative of Sunil Muljal, but now has become a good movement of intellectual exchange, feedbacks, and also a lot of floating of ideas which can be helpful to us in government to refashion our policies. Sunil, this Mindmine Summit is a little special. We have been re-elected again with a bigger majority. And the people of Patna Sahib constituency have elected me as a member of Lok Sabha too. Therefore, I have twofold responsibilities today to share. But the initial observations of Sunil has led me to completely redo the idea I has thought of sharing with you. He rightly talked of democracy, maybe noisy, maybe chaotic. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, it is for the first time I am sharing with you my experience of evolution of Indian democracy. And I have been an activist from my student life, many of you may know. Having been in charge of 8 states of India on behalf of my party, ranging from Rajasthan to Tamil Nadu to Assam, to Uttarakhand, to Chhattisgarh, to Bengal, apart from my own state of Bihar. This evolution of Indian democracy is truly remarkable. And today, using the platform of Mindmine Summit, I wish to convey my deep sense of gratitude to the founding fathers of Indian Constitution. There was a debate in the Constituent Assembly. Is India really ready for democracy? Should we have some kind of a limited democracy? Or should we accord the right to vote to only literate people, landed people? And ultimately they took a call that no, we'll trust ordinary Indians, regardless of sex, religion, faith, literacy, or income, to determine the destiny of India. 70 years down the line, what is the upshot of all this, ladies and gentlemen? The upshot is the people of India know who they are and what they owe to themselves. And the second most important, people of India know that they can unseat any political party or any political leader from power at the center or the state. This has brought about a great degree of humility in the polity of India. I would give you 2 instances. There were political forces in South India in some states who talked of alienating away from India for a variety of reasons. But once they came to power, they never talked of alienation because people's mandate brought about responsibility. The second example, because these are something very interesting you also need to know, therefore I'm sharing, egged on by the observations of Sunil. There was a big leader of Khalistan movement who became a member of parliament. He never recognized the idea of India. But when he came to the Lok Sabha, he took oath under the Indian Constitution and never talked of breaking India. And the third, when I was the information broadcasting minister in Mr. Bajpayee government, I had gone to Northeast and a young chief minister of a Northeast state invited me for lunch. He was earlier an extremist, secessionist. I asked him, how are you feeling? He said, I'm feeling very nice. What I used to think, to do, I'm doing as the chief minister. This great humbling experience of Indian democracy, you need to understand. And therefore, regardless of the chaos and the noise, there is an inherent beauty of Indian democracy which you need to understand. ये किसका भाषण चल रहा है भाई? थोड़ा इसको रोका जाए. The second thing I would like to share with you is, and that's very important, that there are 3 stages of India's polity. And Sunil, I'm sharing it for the first time on your platform, deeply inspired by what you have observed. The first was the politics of want after independence. इस मुल्क में रोटी बांटने की सियासत बहुत हुई है. how the bread will be distributed. लेकिन रोटी की संख्या कैसे बढ़ाई जाए, इसकी सियासत कभी नहीं हुई है. And we wasted 25 years on this politics. I remember when I became member of parliament for the first time in the year 2000, I had the princely right to give 100 gas cylinders and 100 phones. And the government will liberalize the mobile, liberalize the gas distribution. And ultimately, after 2 years, no one used to ask for it. The second part of India's polity is the politics of identity. Identity of religion, of faith, of caste, of region. That continued for nearly 25, 30 years. I don't wish to go into the details of that. Now the third phase of India's polity, the politics of aspiration, the politics of empowerment. The reason as to why I explain this background, how do we explain the victory of Prime Minister Narendra Modi? And I seek the indulgence of Sunil to mention about my leader. The caste Modi ji in Gujarat is just 1%, to which he belongs. Today, we got more than 50% of votes in more than 16 states of India, including unknown territories. I must acknowledge we are organizationally not that strong in Bengal, but we won 18 seats there. I would attribute 3 factors to our victory. Number one, people of India thought that Mr. Narendra Modi comes from a humble family, very poor family. If he can rise to the top, we can also rise. The politics of entitlement is now maturing into the politics of expectation and empowerment. That's the first explanation I would like to give. The second, ordinary people thought the safety of India is more in the hand of Mr. Modi. And thirdly, the kind of work which you have done, delivered on the ground, from Ayushman Bharat to delivery of gases, to Swachh Bharat, to toilet, to digital India delivery, which I will refer to subsequently very briefly. All these led to a different kind of narrative happening on the ground. I see India's democracy maturing. And I felt very proud of my Prime Minister sitting on the ramparts of Red Fort on the 15th of August, when from that hallowed platform he saluted India's wealth creators. Openly said that ultimately wealth create, set up enterprise, give jobs, give tax, and we all need to be respectful for them. Now see how India's political thinking has completely shifted. Because many of you come from industry, therefore I thought I must convey to you. And now, 70 years down the line, the India's popularly elected Prime Minister is publicly appealing from the rampart of Red Fort on the 15th of August that we need to be respectful towards those who create wealth. And ladies and gentlemen, there is an underlying philosophy behind this. And what is that underlying philosophy? Growth without equity is possible. It will be elitist, it will be pro-rich, it will be oligarchic. But for genuine equity to come, growth is important. रोटी 10 होगी तो बांटने में कठिनाई होगी, रोटी 10 लाख होगी तो बांटने में और कठिनाई होगी. Sunil, I want to share a very interesting anecdote with you today, because I am getting nostalgic after hearing you. All my written thought I have given a go by. You know, late Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a leader of great pragmatism. Now he's no more, we recall, he was almost like a father figure to all of us, reared us from our childhood days. It was a privilege to work in his cabinet also. One day, his inimitable style asked us, आजकल हीरो होंडा पर कितना ब्लैक चल रहा है? We were taken aback. You remember those days? Hero Honda was a prized item. Then he said, एक चपरासी अगर अपनी बेटी की शादी में अपने दामाद को हीरो होंडा देना चाहेगा तो कैसे देगा? कुछ करो आप लोग. We got the hint from him. And the rest is history. Today, you can get a motorcycle in a week's notice. This is how India's politics has been faulty. And today, if speaking on this platform, let me make one observation. India has only 4 popularly elected prime ministers who were elected by the people of India as prime minister. The first, obviously, was Jawaharlal Nehru. The second was Indira Gandhi. The third was Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And the fourth is Narendra Modi. I have consciously not mentioned Rajiv Gandhi because Rajiv Gandhi was not elected on his own talent and ability and performance. Because the unfortunate assassination of his mother, the sentiment was there. But my complaint against those who led India in the initial 25 to 35 years is plainly this. Why did they crush the private sector? Why, under the menacing influence of license, permit, quota Raj, the entrepreneurship spirit of India was killed? Why it was stated that all the ministers, all the judges, all the bureaucrats have to move only in one car? This I have never appreciated. Come on. The sheer entrepreneurial skill of India is remarkable. And my working in the IT electronic ministry, the experience which I have received in the last 5 years, and I'm grateful to the Prime Minister having given it back again, along with the added responsibility of communication. No power on earth can stop India from emerging a true global power. And I say so with full sense of responsibility. Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, in the last nearly 3.5 years, we launched the Startup India in the year 2015. India today is home to 19,000 plus startups. And 8,000 are technology startups. And 8 are those which are unicorn. Unicorn means $1 billion plus turnover. Tomorrow I'm going to give Economic Times Startup Award in Bangalore, one of the functions I'm going to. I remember 2 years ago, I had gone to give that award. And the top boy, I will call him a boy, who was hardly 21, 22, Dadi bhi nahi aai. He has an idea, and he has raised close to $1 million by way of startup funds from venture capital, venture investments. That is the India emerging, and that is the DNA of India. I regret to, I always, when I say so, I recall Sunil's father, Brijmohan Dalji. From humble background of cycle in Punjab, becoming a giant in the field of automobile. एक दिन में सपना था करना है. And this he did when the license permit quota Raj was there with his full force. I think if India has to grow forward, this entrepreneurship spirit has to be really promoted in full gusto. And I would appreciate if it is properly blended with the application of technology. You know, ladies and gentlemen, if you apply technology well, how it works. India's population is 1.3 billion plus 130 crore. And what is the digital profile of India? Aadhaar, 123 crores. Mobile phone, 121 crore, 1.21 billion. A smartphone, close to 70 crores. Now, if you apply technology, how good governance becomes the natural consequence. What is Aadhaar? Aadhaar is nothing but a digital identity, where the core biometrics is your iris and the 10 fingers. God has been unique in its manufacturing ability. No two fingerprints ever match, and no two iris ever match. Now what we did, and remember, Aadhaar is a low-cost technology manufactured by Indian scientists. And it is safe with due regard to privacy, followed by parliamentary law. And it's so tough that if I, as an IT and Law Minister of India, seek to give information about my own biometrics to anyone else, I can be prosecuted. Now what we did? We opened close to 36 crore bank account of poor who had no access to bank account. Linked that with Aadhaar, also accessed by mobile. And started sending pro-people subsidies directly to their bank account. DBT, what we call, direct benefit transfer. We sent about 7,70,000 crores, and we have saved close to 1,80,000 crores, which used to be pocketed by middlemen and fictitious claimants. Technology brings in good governance. And I would urge the industry people here that whatever ecosystem is required to be done, we are doing, and we'll continue to do that. But in a fair government regime with good governance as the focus, delivery is not difficult. Sunil mentioned about my experience as the electronic minister. One day, Prime Minister in his inimitable style asked me, sometime in 2015, रवि तुम कहते हो देश में इतना मोबाइल है, बनता कितना है? I found to my utter discomfort, in 2014 there were only 2 mobile factories, only 2. Now India is home to 268 mobile factories. India has become the second biggest mobile manufacturer in the world. And Sunil will be happy to know, in Noida and Greater Noida alone, 93 mobile factories have come. And the Samsung's latest factory is going to produce 1 crore mobile every month. I went to Germany, I went to South Korea, I went to other places. And today India has become about 6 lakh people work there. What is my future plan? Yes, automobile is there, electronics, they also in Intel Electronics. Yes, solar panel is there. Yes, LED bulb is there. I would wish for 2 things. And here I would seek Sunil's, your intervention also. First is strategic electronics. And what is strategic electronics? Defense electronics. Electronics is also some kind of a software now, beyond the conventional electronics. I want India to become a leader in strategic electronics, with due application of artificial intelligence in governance and also in manufacturing. And the second most important, medical electronics. And this I took very seriously when one day I had gone to my dentist. So he was fiddling with this. हमने कहा ये जो सुई है ये हिंदुस्तान में बनती है क्या? कहा नहीं बनती है. क्या मतलब है? हमने कहा जिस कुर्सी पर आपने मुझे बिठाया है वो हिंदुस्तान में बनता है? कहा ये भी नहीं बनता है. The same day I summoned my secretary electronics. मैंने कहा ये नहीं चलेगा. And then we segregated. India has a huge potential of medical electronics products, commercially speaking. We have, we are going to give, we are giving already 5 lakh per month to close to 10 crore family consisting of 50 crore recipients. About 1 lakh wellness centers are coming, 120 medical colleges are being upgraded or being established. Why is it that a stethoscope machine, MRI machine, X-ray machine, radiological machine can't be manufactured in India? They have enough scope. I think Indian enterprise must seriously explore this possibility and potential to make India a big hub of medical devices manufacturing center. And that is a market waiting to be tapped. And I'm sure with all these things coming, they can easily be properly at good, modest cost also, with good margin also for the manufacturer. They will create more and more jobs. This strategic electronics, medical electronics are areas. Strategic electronics will be for defense, for high-end computing, for other purposes, medical electronics for the purposes I just explained. These are two huge areas which requires to be properly tapped. Economy part, you rightly stated, the PM has already given the message from the ramparts of Red Fort, Sunil. He said in his own style, in the coming 4 to 5 years, we will focus on infrastructure where the government expending will lead to 100 lakh crores. Therefore, the commitment of the Prime Minister from the rampart of Red Fort is a nation's commitment which is already given on the 15th of August. And obviously, when the government is going to come with this whole larger narrative of expenses, others which the government has in mind on priority basis, it will lead to addressing some of the discomfort, maybe from global regions or other regions. But let us not hype this discomfort. I am very clear about it. The fundamentals of Indian economy is strong. Whether it's the FDI or whether India's rating globally, whether India is an investment destination, India is the business destination, is all there. I see in my sector alone, yes, certain norms of ours shall be very clear. No compromise on security, no compromise on India's sovereignty, and no compromise on basic norms of ethics and probity. These are our preconditions which we shall follow. Therefore, and maybe the government has many other ideas in mind. Some of them were articulated in the budget. The finance minister is having interaction, so is the prime minister. So something more is required to be done, it will be done. But I am very clear that the fundamental of Indian economy is very strong. Now coming to the specific query, today you have made me forget everything I wrote here, Sunil. Huh? But anyway, I am enjoying that. Huh? Thank you. I am very happy you talked of my justice portfolio. Access to justice should be our priority. And India must become a center of and hub of arbitration was equally my priority. I was following it. We set up a committee under Justice Sri Krishna, a very distinguished retired Supreme Court judge, Attorney General, very eminent jurists were part of that. What should we do? And they have come up with a report. And we have passed the law also that. We want to set up India as a good center of institutional arbitration. And those institutions must be properly verified, credible. Therefore, to assess the credibility of those institutions, we are going to set up Arbitration Council of India very soon, to be presided over by a retired Supreme Court Chief Justice or a judge and distinguished people in the field of law. India today has about 35 institutions only. We want even a small towns of India to have institution of arbitration. And there the business can work well, as it is doing very well in Delhi, in Ahmedabad, Baroda and Mumbai, etc. We're also setting up a New Delhi Arbitration Center in Delhi as a big center of global arbitration. That is a work in progress. As a law minister, I'll be the happiest if India has good arbitrators. India has good arbitrators. India has good judges. I don't buy that logic that a new imperialism is emerging. Queen's Counsel barristers from London going to Singapore and all. I want to see India's arbitrator as quality global arbitrators. India's lawyers as good arbitration lawyers. All those mechanisms we have kept in place and will continue to pursue that. But the real aspiration of common people I would like to share with you, ladies and gentlemen. And Sunil, I'm sharing for the first time here. I decided to set up BPOs in small towns of India. I decided I will give them some subsidy. My department were dead against me. मैंने सर आप क्या कर रहे हैं? हमने कहा मैं करूँगा, तुम्हें करना पड़ेगा. Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, in 3.5 years down the line, India is home to nearly 200 plus BPOs in 120 towns of India. And these towns are where? Imphal, Manipur, Kohima, Nagaland, Guwahati and Jorhat in Assam, Bhubaneswar and Jalesar in Odisha, Malda, Murshidabad, Siliguri in Bengal. My own city, Patna, has 8 BPOs. One has come in Muzaffarpur, Aurangabad, Lucknow, Ghaziabad, Bhiwandi, South India. And I frequently visit these BPOs. In Muzaffarpur I had gone, in Guwahati I had gone. And the most moving was, in Muzaffarpur there are 400 boys and girls working there. And all the girls had called their parents from villages to meet me. Mantri ji aa rahe hain, aap aao. The glimmer of hope I saw in their eyes was truly amazing. 6 months of training on computer and the art of speaking, I could see how empowered they are. That's the India waiting to be tapped. That's the India we have to encourage. And the way I have seen the mobile revolution happening in India, and this instance I wish to share with all of you, Sunil. As an IT minister, I sit in Scope Complex. As a law minister, I sit in Shastri Bhavan. As a communication minister, I sit in Sanchar Bhavan. So one day I was going from Scope Complex office to my law ministry, and there is a big red light. In came a thela rickshawala. He was talking on 2 smartphones because the red light was there. On one said, "Sahab, मैंने आपका माल पहुंचा दिया है," and to other he was saying, "आप wait करिए, 1 घंटे में पहुंचा दूंगा." I thought of getting down and taking a self photograph on my mobile, but my security always said, "Please, ये चौरास्ता है." No one told him, but he realized if he has to be in business, he must have not 1 but 2 smartphones. That is what technology creates. The whole social media movement, regardless of all the weaknesses, why I'm happy about, it is empowering the people of India. And how people share, there's a very moving experience I would like to share with you. My mother is 88. I had gone to Patna, my political tour. In the evening, my flight was there. My wife had arranged a bhajan sandhya for her. My mother called me, "Mere paas bhi kuch baithoge tum?" So I sat by her side, and the bhajan was going on for an hour. And she was enjoying me sitting in my company. My PA took a video on the mobile and put it on the Facebook, just mentioning this. Do you know how many people liked it? 40 lakh people. That's a new India emerging. Let's celebrate this India. An India which wants to share, an India which wants to get involved, an India which wants to articulate, an India which wants to be informed. Whatever is bad, whatever is offensive, whatever is promoting terrorism, extremism, hatred, we need to check and we will take action. And we are taking action. But the sheer empowerment of India's view, aspiration, and emotions is a new India powered by technology. How we can work differently is something I will say in conclusion. I think I've spoken too much. Parliament doesn't work. This is the common refrain. This time in the first cabinet, the Prime Minister gave us a challenge. And the PM is in the habit of giving us challenge. And I'm very proud of that. One day he told us, कि 1800 गांव में बिजली नहीं है, क्या कर रहे हो तुम लोग? 6 months करके दिखाओ, and the rest is history. It did happen. Today all the villages of India are having electricity. क्या तुम लोग नई सरकार जीत कर आई है, इस पार्लियामेंट को पूरा प्रोडक्टिव कर सकते हो? करो. And all of us got the challenge. And Sudhila, I'm very happy to tell you that we passed 35 bills in 37 sittings, surpassing even the highest of 1952 session, which had 24 bills in 67 sittings. अगर करने का इरादा हो, we also reached out to the opposition. They also agreed. And 2 of the path-breaking legislation we passed, abrogation of Article 370 and triple talaq. I don't want to go into the politics of Article 370. That will be a separate forum. But I only wish to share with you one thing. Do you know, 70 years down the line, Prevention of Corruption Act was not applicable in Jammu and Kashmir. Right to education, right to information, Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, and the most sickening, prohibition of moving latrine on head, manual scavenging, which was prohibited way back in 1991. That law was also not applicable. Why? We need to reach out to the common people of Jammu and Kashmir. And I would appeal to all of you, in your own modest way, to give a helping hand, to be in touch with them, and also create opportunity for them. This whole BPO movement I talked about, Sunil, you'll be happy to know, I was personally monitoring it. In the last 2 years, BPOs are operating in Srinagar, in Badgam, in Baramulla, in Anantnag, the so-called terrorist-infested areas. And I used to call those who used to operate to Delhi and used to pat them. People seek opportunities, and so are the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And yes, as a law minister moving this triple talaq prohibition bill, one of the biggest triumphs of my life, as I have said, it has nothing to do with gender or mode of worship or religion or faith. It was basically designed for gender justice, gender dignity, and gender equality. ये इंसानियत और इंसाफ का तकाजा था. And some of the women came to meet me, and their 2 words are very moving for me. And what they said, कि कानून मंत्री जी, हमारी ईद भी आज है, हमारा 15 अगस्त भी आज है, जो आपने 3 तलाक को खत्म किया है. I could see their agony and the discrimination which they used to suffer. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, in spite of all the chaos and noise and pause of democracy, democracy has a beauty of its own. If you work, people respond. If you deliver, people re-elect you. And regardless of all the headlines and television shouting, there is a great degree of commitment undergoing in the entire country. And what is that commitment? हमें भी बड़ा बनना है, हमें भी आगे बढ़ना है. I think truly the moment of India has arrived. Thank you. Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. That was truly insightful. Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted in releasing a report jointly with KPMG on India redefining its growth path. I request our Chief Guest and Honorable Minister, Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad ji, to kindly do the honors. Can we have Ms. Akhil Bansal on stage to grace the report release? Can we have a round of applause for sir? Can we have the KPMG family on stage, please? A round of applause for KPMG. We can do better. Let's have a much bigger round of applause. This is a very special report. India redefining its growth path. Now I'd request Shri Yogesh Munjalji to kindly grace the stage and present a memento to our chief guest and Honorable Minister Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad ji. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly bear with us for a couple of minutes. We need to reset for our next session. Tea and coffee will be served on the table itself. A humble request to please be seated. Tea and coffee will be served on the table itself. We are about to start our next session within a few moments. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting our next session. A humble request for all those standing to please be seated. Tea and coffee will be served on your table itself. Ladies and gentlemen, all those who are standing, a humble request to please be seated. ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start. A humble request to all who are standing up front to please take your seats. The ones at the back also, tea and coffee will be served to you on the table itself. Mindmine Summit में हमारे जितने भी गेस्ट हैं आप सबसे गुजारिश की जा रही है कृपया करके अपनी सीट्स पर बैठ जाइए। हम अगला सेशन शुरू करने जा रहे हैं। चाय और कॉफी आपको आपके टेबल पर ही सर्व की जाएगी। Ladies and gentlemen who are standing up front, it's a humble request to please be seated. We are starting with our next session. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is the world in 2020. Is a recession coming? Can we have a round of applause for our esteemed group of panelists? Mr. Krishnamurthy Subramanian, Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India. Mr. Subhash Chandra Garg, Power Secretary, Government of India. Mr. Omkar Goswami, Indian economist. Mr. Puneet Chatwal from Indian Hotels. And the session will be moderated by Ms. Shireen Bhan, Managing Editor, CNBC TV 18. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks very much for joining us here. I think this promises to be an exciting session because we're not just going to be talking about India, we're also going to talk about the outlook for the global economy in 2020. Let's just set the context and let me start by talking about the world. And let me throw some data your way. And this is courtesy Ruchir Sharma, the author of Breakout Nations and the Rise and Fall of Nations. The emerging market head at Morgan Stanley. And Ruchir says in his latest report that not one major country is growing as fast today as it was in the last decade. Not one is growing faster than 10%, the rate China and other miracle economies sustained for years on end during the post-war golden age between 1950 and 2007. Now here's why, perhaps. The 4 Ds, that's deglobalization, demographics, debt, and declining productivity. These have been buffeting the global economy since the crisis of 2008, but now these are the factors that are probably contributing to the decline that we're seeing. More data. Germany is one of at least 5 major economies on the verge of a recession, which basically means that they've seen 2 straight quarters of negative growth. And the question then is that do we now need to do a reset? Do we now need to redefine the way that we look at growth itself? Is 5 the new 7? Is 4 emerging market economies? And what is the prescription then that policymakers need to adopt, need to follow? Let's talk a little bit about India. And I think Ravi Shankar Prasad, just before our session started, talked about the fact that there is discomfort in the economy, that not too much should be made of the discomfort in the economy. We've just seen the budget being presented, and barely a month after the budget presentation, we're now seeing industry queuing up, seeking more from the government by way of intervention, saying that, look, we need government intervention to be able to beat the slowdown. So let's start by talking a little bit about India, and let me get the Chief Economic Advisor, Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, to give us a little sense about where things currently stand. How bad is the slowdown? Is there a need for fiscal stimulus or not?
Some very loaded questions there.
Not loaded, a straight question actually.
So the first point I want to make is, as you rightly said, in an economy which is a global economy where other countries are struggling to grow at, let's say, 2.5%. Let's acknowledge that India continues to, remain the bright spot, even with, let's say, a little bit of a decrease in the growth rate. So that's the number one point to. Second, I think we have to be a little careful. So I've always felt that we in India tend to oscillate between either irrational exuberance or excessive pessimism. For instance, around 2008, 2009, we seem to be pretending that we don't need to do anything. Just a normal course will grow at 8-9%. That clearly was not the truth. Nor is basically some of the pessimism now, I think, is true. For instance, let me sort of finish that point. There was a good article in the Economic Times on Saturday, which looked at various sectors, and showed that while there are some sectors that are actually not doing that well, there are other sectors which are doing very well as well. And I think we have to be a little bit more careful when we, and this is something I always actually try and tell my students. There are 3 A's that we need to be careful about: the anecdotes, the aggregates, and the averages. When you just look at anecdotes, oftentimes you indulge in bad thinking. Good thinking is about looking at averages and aggregates. And when you look at in the aggregate, you look at sectors that are doing well, rather than just focusing on the anecdotes of some sectors that are not doing that well. I think you get a much better perspective. So that's something that we have to absolutely acknowledge. Now, your second question about the fiscal stimulus. Now, here's where I think we have to be careful. Starting around 1991 now, we're a market economy. In a market economy, there are sectors that actually go through a sunrise phase and then through a sunset phase. I think, if we basically expect the government to sort of use taxpayer money to sort of intervene every time when there are basically, let's say, some sunset, then I think you introduce possible moral hazard from too big to fail, and as well as the possibility of a situation where profits are private and losses are socialized, which is basically completely anathema to the way a market economy works. So these are some critical factors that we must keep in mind. A couple of other just observations that I want to make. There's often a talk about, let's say, the automobile sector or the real estate sector. Some of the difficulties there sort of symptomatic of the economy. I think you have to be careful here, because yesterday's very nice op-ed by Dr. Arvind Panagaria in the Times of India, where he's talked about how the automobile sector, given the kind of customs duties that there are, there are inherent issues. Together with that, there's disruption that is coming in various forms, be it the Ola, Uber phenomenon. Be it the fact that, today for the younger generation, a car is not necessarily a status symbol. To that, you also add the disruption that's coming from EVs. Now, none of these necessarily have to do with the economy. So you've got to be careful to say that let's say some of the what's happening in the auto sector is necessarily symptomatic of the economy. I think that's not very sort of very precise, and that's why we have to be looking at aggregates, not just at anecdotes.
Okay, I'll get to aggregates in just a second, but I just want to labor on what you said, and you brought up the auto sector as an example and the real estate sector as an example, both sectors where there is a significant unsold inventory problem as well. And you're absolutely right that some of it is perhaps on the part of industry's own shortcomings, and perhaps some of it is to do with disruption as well as the general momentum in the economy. So if I were to read between the lines, you're basically saying that no intervention is required today.
I'm not going to give any more weight to what you're trying to read between the lines. I've stated what I've stated in terms of the principles that we must go about. I think the operationalization of those principles is something that we'll have to wait for.
Okay, the operationalizations of the principles, but I think if I were to read between the lines, and it's fairly clear that you're suggesting that a fiscal stimulus, at least for certain sectors at this point in time, may not necessarily be warranted. Let me come to the former Finance Secretary, Mr. Garg. What is the problem today, to your mind? And to pick up on what the chief economic advisor stated, that it's important not just to look at anecdotes, it's also important to look at aggregates. Now let's take a look at some of the aggregate data. Investments by corporate firms that filed annual returns between 2010-11 to 16-17 as a percentage of GDP has gone from 15% to 10.5% to 10.2% to 9.8%, 9%, 7.5%, and now 2.7%. That's the aggregate story. What's the picture looking like from here on? And why do you believe that we are in this situation where the aggregate tells us this story?
I think this session is basically on the global growth.
I said we'll start by talking about India and then we'll get to the world.
I would come to India also, but let me just give you, because that's the wider setting.
Yeah.
India is part of the global
Sure.
story, right? So today the global economy still is growing at about 2.9% to 3%. Even global, there is no recession.
Yeah.
There is no, and last 2 years we grew at about 3.5%, 3.6% globally. In that context, this is a little bit of slowdown. But if you take 4 years before that, the average growth was only 2.4, 2.5%.
Yeah.
So this year's growth globally would be higher than the growth of 6 to 7 years taken together as an average. So let us not be too much, let me say, the media especially tends to somehow, and chief economic advisor also referred to that, overblow the story of slowdown and things like that. Number one,
Sir, it's not the media that's queuing up at North Block meeting the Prime Minister as well as Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister. It's industry that's telling the government that we're in pain. So, I don't know if it's accurate to blame the media for this.
No, it's not blame. Somehow our mindset, we tend to either feel a little more depressed than what the fact of the situation would warrant. So globally, to my mind, there is no recession.
Sure.
It's unlikely. The topic suggested what's going to happen in 2020. I don't think that situation is anywhere near that. So now let me come to India now, in terms of aggregates and also. Some numbers you read out about the corporate tax growth and corporate turnover growth in the bottom line. Last year, the first quarter happened to be the best of the lot. Indian economy grew at 8.2%. Corporates' profits were also much higher. I think it was about 20% along. Even this was reflected in our tax revenues also. So last year, the tax growth in the first quarter was something close to 18 to 20%. Right? This year, the first quarter happens to be the quarter where there was a lot of election-related work. There was a slowdown from the government expenditure. This year, the first quarter, the government was in cash balances, which is very unusual. Government expenditure came down from something like 32% of the yearly budget to something like 25, 26%. All these factors had taken a little bit of a toll on the first quarter. So let us not, the first quarter's number are likely to come 31st. It might come around 5.5 to 6%. People might treat that as another evidence of a big slowdown. It's not.
Okay.
We will need to root it into the reality of what the first quarter this year is in comparison to the first quarter of last year.
So would you then also concur that at this point in time there is no need for a fiscal stimulus, which is the expectation? And if not, then, and this is a cyclical phenomena that we're going through, what are the kind of counter-cyclical measures that you would expect?
Let me again put this into some context. I don't know why, but for some reason, in the last 3 years which I have seen, so it is 2019, 18 and 17, the quarter of July to September has been one of the quarters where slowdown was most prominently in the news. Right. In 2017, it was because of the IBC and the GST having been introduced. So the production was much less in the first quarter, which was reflected. I remember very clearly 2 years back in the same months, there was all the time a lot of talk about slowdown, stimulus and other kind of things.
Okay.
Last year, we may not forget last year, thanks to oil price rise, etc., everywhere in the media, this was that the fiscal, forget fiscal deficit, the current account
Yeah.
was going down so badly, etc. So you need to do. Again, this year, this quarter happens to be the one where there is a lot of talk.
Okay.
I think the sentiment will change,
Okay.
and we should need to take a very careful decision that is the fiscal stimulus based on additional borrowings from the market
Yeah.
and cutting down the access to the private sector, the funds.
Right.
We have a problem with the rate mechanism.
Yeah.
We don't have the transmission very efficiently.
Yeah.
If you further borrow,
Yeah.
further reduce, the transmission will not take place. And
Absolutely.
secondly, what works better? The rate reduction in the interest rate to the private people, availability of credit to the private
Yeah.
people. Is that a better way rather than the stimulus?
Okay.
I think we don't debate that very much.
Okay.
Last three quarters, or three weeks, the bond rates have gone up by about 25 basis
Yes.
points. I think this will hurt industry much more than anything like this. So we need to debate what is the best way to do it. I think, in my judgment, the better way mechanism to support the industry is to bring down the rate of interest, make the credit grow to them. That is a much better way, to my mind, to stimulus rather than the
Versus a fiscal stimulus. Well, I think both of you are on the same page. Omkar Goswami, before we talk a little bit about the world, let's finish the conversation around what India needs to do at this point in time. And clearly, this is a balancing act for policymakers given the fiscal constraints. What, to your mind, should be the policy prescription?
I'm both fortunate and unfortunate that I don't work for government. So I can say some things which people who work for government are naturally constrained. And I appreciate their constraints. Let me start by spending a couple of minutes saying that it's not a recession. Firstly,
Yeah.
we use this term, Shireen, so loosely in India that I've not seen anywhere else. Recession everywhere, by and large, is 2 successive
Quarters of negative growth.
negative
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah.
But people use the word recession in India at the drop of a hat. It is a slowdown
Yes.
in growth. And let me just make my points. It's the real question to ask, is this a cyclical slowdown? That is, it's going down, it may go down one more quarter, and then it'll be all okay.
Yeah.
Slowly it'll come back again. Or is it something more structural? I don't think we have a clear answer to this. Those who are in favor of saying, no, it's a cycle, we are on a down cycle in growth, but we'll come back again soon enough in a quarter or two, and then go back onto the up cycle, don't know what they're saying. And those who are saying 100% it is structural also don't have enough data. But there are some very worrying structural-like signs in the economy. And I'm going to mention 3. One is, it's quite amazing that for the last 22 years, not a short period of time, the share of manufacturing to GDP
Yeah.
has remained stubborn and constant at 15%.
Right.
So nothing has happened in terms of increasing the share of manufacturing to GDP. Second is, as of now, a large number of industries that make up the index of industrial production are seeing a slowdown. The third is, despite a huge amount of liquidity in the banking system, it is, as far as public sector banks are concerned, it is very difficult to get the kind of borrowings that are needed. It's very tight because the banks are very scared of lending. But fourth, I'm going to mention 2 issues which are very, very important. As far as we are concerned, if you go forward for the next 20 years, the literacy of the population between 18 and 24, which is the age group of people coming in, we are way off the curve completely compared to Southeast Asia, compared to China, compared to East Asia, compared to a large number of countries with whom one way or the other we compete. And also, as far as the share of women in the workforce is concerned, it's low and it's falling.
Yeah.
So if you were to take the longer and the shorter term things, I think we are possibly in the beginning of a structural situation. It's not a pure business cycle, and it may take longer to come out of than we think. As far as stimulus is concerned, we can wish for all the fiscal stimulus that we have, but the fisc is broke. Simple as that. When I take away the public sector borrowing requirements from the exchequer, when I look at the slowing of the rate of growth of tax coming in this year, the fisc is broke. So unless they want to break the fiscal deficit, I'm not a fiscal deficit fetishist, but unless they want to break the fiscal deficit that they've set onto themselves, they don't have no cash.
Absolutely, and that raises the issue that Mr. Garg raised, that if you do in fact do that, if you do exceed the fiscal deficit target, then what is it going to mean in terms of borrowing costs? And then we're back to square one, not trying to address. But just to pick up on the point, and then I'll come to you, Puneet, in just a second, to get you to comment on what we just heard there from Omkar, that this seems to be the start of a structural slowdown, not necessarily just a cyclical one.
Let me qualify this very. There is no certainty that it is. But there are enough lights that are showing amber.
So I do want to, present a different view on the same aspect. While I do think there is a structural element, while Omkar is actually viewing the structural element in a negative way, I actually look at it in a lot more positive. And here's why. So if you look at it from the 2009 to 2014 period, and not just that period, but I think that was sort of a culmination of some habits that had crept up, which is basically one of which was, very meager equity in the corporations, use of sort of features like borrowing debt in the subsidiaries, putting it as equity in parents, putting up your basically shares as collateral. So there's effectively the extent of equity in the system, and just the way business was getting done. I think there were bad habits that actually had not only crept in but had actually gotten accentuated.
Fair point.
So this ramp up in the, in leverage, corporate leverage and capacity, which happened over almost a 6 to 8 year period, the unwinding of that actually, cannot happen in an instant. It is something, so we are still sort of undergoing the overhang of that. But what I look at it as a very, very important point is that, we are in the process of trying to actually reduce and eliminate some of these bad habits. And I'll give you one specific example. I cannot imagine a market economy which basically which would have a credit culture without a bankruptcy code. The introduction of the bankruptcy code, not only has it reduced basically the NPAs by 3 lakh crores, and here's where again the aggregates versus anecdotes is very important to focus on, but let me not get distracted by that. What is also important is, given the threat now of actually, if a project does not do very well, that a promoter may face the risk of that company, of losing control over that company. The way capital budgeting gets done is something that actually requires a lot more, expertise. And remember, such expertise does not get built overnight. Earlier, you could actually put some numbers on the Excel sheet, not worry about it, because anyway, ex post, if things didn't work out, there are other mechanisms to. But today, you actually have to go and do that capital budgeting exercise very carefully. You have to actually, so there is this process of bringing in some good habits, which actually is going on, and therefore it makes me a lot more sanguine that the structural part that is accounting for the slowdown is something that will lead us to sort of better times, because otherwise, see, one of the key things I look at is, in our case, actually, growth sort of went too far ahead of the checks and balances that we built in.
Okay.
And in the absence of those checks and balances, the governance, you always have a system where you accelerate and then you have to hit speed breaker and then decelerate for a long period. If you have to grow in a sustained manner,
Yeah.
and I think crises across the globe really illustrate that without actually proper governance, you cannot grow in a sustained manner, because the quality of credit is as important as the quantity.
So the short-term pain you're saying is something that
Absolutely,
we're going to have to face. Puneet, let me ask you, because you have a sense of the Indian market as well as what's happening globally. And as I pointed out, consumption data continues to actually drive growth, whether it's the US economy or here in India. Of course, this has started to decelerate as well. But what's the outlook now as far as global growth is concerned, as well as the outlook for India?
So Shireen, one thing is common, sitting on a panel in India or sitting globally, what you hear from the experts is, this quarter or that growth figure or the consumption number is less bad than we actually interpret it to be. So whether it's the headlines, whether we call it the anecdotes, or we call it the, whatever, the 3 A's or the 3 C's or the 4 D's. That just made me think, sitting here, of definitely an anecdote which I would say we should all start getting used to be a very simple thing. The less bad is the new good. And, the world is, I think, in a very simple terms, I'm not an economist and I don't know what I'm doing on this panel, but I'm very happy and privileged to be a part of this. I think there is a permanent damage to the pricing power in all sectors of the globe. We are not having the same ability to charge as we used to have earlier.
Okay.
And that, whether it's cyclical or structural, I don't think I can share so much, but definitely it is sentimental.
Okay.
It's not that there is dearth of capital in the world. There is more liquidity or private equity in the market than maybe ever before.
Yes.
But there is a reluctance to invest. And I think a sentiment is very important. A belief is very important.
Yeah.
And as far as India is concerned, I remain very optimistic that eventually everything will be fine. There are headwinds, but the nature of the nation is such. I think Mr. Munjal said it.
Yes.
It's a young democratic nation of 73 years and a civilization. I would just call it a young civilization. This is a young civilization which has the determination and will to grow, and I think we will get through this phase of this quarter, or April to September, or October to March, and eventually it will be fine.
Okay, eventually it'll be fine. But let me pick up on that point that was being made there. And 2018 was in fact a bumper year when it comes to private equity, not just here in India, but globally as well. The kind of money that has come in from private equity, the kind of large transactions that have happened. But since we're talking about the global picture, Mr. Garg, and we talked about the fact that post-2008, we're now in an era of deglobalization. You're also seeing shrinking of populations across the globe, productivity. What does this now mean in terms of how policymakers need to approach the new rate of growth? And what is that going to be? And should the focus then be more on per capita as opposed to anything else?
I think we need to view the world in a different way now. The world of 2020s is very different than the world of 1980s or 1990s. Just look at the broad, big picture. The global economy is about $90 trillion today, right? Something like 60 trillion of the global GDP is in countries which are what you referred earlier, Ruchir Sharma's demography, savings. These are the countries which are not going to grow beyond 2%. I mean, this is such a 40 years back or 30 years back, these were the growth engines of the world. The US, the EU, the Japan, and other things, right? So 60 out of 90 trillion, if it is expected to grow only at about 2% and not, or maybe 50, then you have a second set of countries, let us say including China, which had its heyday, right? And they were growing very fast, 10% or 30 years,
Yeah.
amazing growth. Now have reached to a stage where
6%.
they're slowing down.
Yeah.
And they would slow. They would slow to 5% or something, or 4%, and go in times to come. This leaves out another 20, $25 billion, right? The rest of the world, which is only about 10 to 15 billion dollars, or trillion dollars, trillion dollars, is the world which will grow in future, right? South Asia, where we are sitting, today is only about $3.5 trillion economy. In 20 years to 25 years, if we do well,
Yeah.
this should be $20 trillion economy, right? Can we plan and do,
Yeah.
right? Africa today, which is less than $2 trillion economy,
Yeah.
should be another $5 to $7 trillion economy in 20 years.
Fair point.
The rest of the emerging market, even some of the emerging market like Russia, Brazil and others, have also gone into that trap. They will not grow.
Yeah.
But then there are Indonesia of the world who will grow. Can we think of, when a lot of time we talk about export-led model, everybody has grown
Yeah.
by exporting to
Yeah.
these. The new growing countries will not grow by exporting to this block, right? They will need to create markets in South Asia, in Africa, in the rest of the emerging markets. That requires a very different kind of strategy and outlook. And there is enough demand, there is enough of that which can drive a lot of growth in our part of the world. Can we seize that?
Okay.
I think if that is the way we see the world today,
Okay.
in a very different light,
Sure.
then we will probably have many, many years of
Of-
very good growth.
Of very good growth. Puneet, very quickly. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to kind of add or maybe throw a question for the specialist here. Can we just keep looking at a figure of 3% growth in the Western economies? Because when we used to look at 4, 4.5, or 6,
Yeah.
the inflation was at also double the level than today. The interest rates were at 7 to 8 to 10%. Today
Yeah.
they are in the negative range.
Yes.
So I do believe there is a structural shift globally. And if somebody read about the bonds issued by Germany or Denmark
Yeah.
with a zero coupon and a zero subscription,
Right.
I think we are going through a very different cycle in the world,
Yeah.
which we cannot understand with the figures of yesterday.
Sure. No, I think you make a valid point. Yeah, go ahead.
This is the same symptom. So $16 trillion of global bonds in the negative. Germans issued $2 billion of bonds, hardly subscribed. But they had the audacity to issue 30-year bond at zero rate of interest.
Yeah.
What does this indicate? This indicates that those economies, that which I was referring to,
Yeah.
had a lot of investable funds but no investment opportunities.
Yeah.
They will not grow. But can that money be brought
To India.
this world?
Yeah, absolutely. To countries like India. You're absolutely right. Omkar, I want to come to you now. And you know, let's be clear that there is a global reset that is underway. And whether we talk about what's happening with central bank policies, what we're seeing happen with bond deals, what we're seeing happen globally with interest rates, and the investable opportunities emerging economies like India throw up. How do we, to quote Subhash Chandra Garg, seize the opportunity in this global reset?
Let me just put it this in very straightforward terms, and I'm not going to answer your question the way you framed it. I am putting this bluntly. The gains that we have had from reforms starting from 1991 and subsequent reforms that occurred, I think are coming to an end. And those gains gave us 7% plus growth rates. Those gains gave us, for 3 years, 9% growth rate. In the situation of the global economy as it is today and other issues within India, those gains are coming to an end. If you want to break out, now there are two options. We can get to a new equilibrium of 5%.
Yeah.
And that'll continue. There'll be no problem with a 5%.
Yeah.
I promise you. I mean, as long as Indians can walk, we'll get 5% growth rate. Yeah. So, but is that sufficient? Is there enough to lift still a very large number of people out of the poverty line and
Yes.
create the kind of consumptions that they need? And the answer is no. So if we want to jack that growth rate by 1% point, from 5% to 6% over a 15-year period or a 10-year period going forward, not 7, 6%, I think we have to sit down, Mr. Modi, Mr. Shah, and whoever else, have to sit down and seriously think of what are the fundamental second-generation reforms, which we have talked about a lot but never did. That time has come, and we can't keep on fiddling around, talking about it and not doing. And then he has the opportunity to do it now. If he doesn't do it in the next 6 months, at least start it off. He loses the game.
The three things, Omkar Goswami, before I get the CA to comment on that, the three things that you believe that the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, along with the Finance Minister, need to sit down and move quickly on.
First, I think there is absolutely, I mean, if the ministries can show in an honest way, it's very difficult to do it in this period because of the shorter year, but in an honest way can systematically increase the pace of disinvestment, it will give a clear signal, absolutely clear signal. Second, it's not an easy thing to do, and that play will take longer, is to have a uniform labor code.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do,
Yeah.
and eventually it's a state subject, they have to accept it.
Right.
So I'm saying start with these two at least.
Okay. Well, at least in disinvestment, the intention has been made
I've
clear.
heard this
I
intention,
know.
Shireen. I've heard this intention from the time the cow was conceived, born, and didn't come home. Chodo ye intention.
Okay.
So let me actually, there was talk about consumption, there was talk about sentiment. So let me try and, hopefully bring some clarity to what do we need to do. And this is something, the first chapter of the economic survey, we try to do
Yes.
this. See, economies are complex systems. And, the question that you have to ask is it that sentiment drives consumption, or is it consumption that drives sentiment?
Yeah.
Is it investment that drives consumption, or basically there are many variables that are co-moving at the same time. And therefore, the exercise that we did is when we sat down, actually said, okay, let's look at countries after the Second World War.
Yeah.
We put two filters saying, a country has to be growing at least 5% plus over a 10-year period.
Yes.
And said these, we got a set of countries and said, which included China, Southeast Asia, etc. What is that one thing that these countries did which basically enabled them to grow at 5% plus over a sustained period of time?
Yeah.
And the answer there is very, very clear. And actually, this is not an opinion that I'm actually peddling. It is based on very careful evidence that we've gathered and we've actually put together in the survey. It is investment.
Yes.
And therefore it is, by looking at the Western economies today, and which basically depend on consumption, one of the key things that clearly stands out is that once you're about a $10,000 above that per capita, then consumption can actually be relied on for growth. But for economies at the stage at which we are, and the evidence, I think, is very, very clear, investment, especially private sector investment. And let me now add to, I think, what Omkar...
But I don't think anyone's arguing with that. I think the case for investment, and specifically private sector investment, has been made ad nauseum. The question, though, is what will it take for the private sector investment to pick up? We've been talking about these animal spirits being unleashed for a long time. When and how will they be unleashed?
But this is what I'm saying is important, because oftentimes you keep hearing, there's basically, investment is not happening because consumption is not there, or sentiments are not there. I think this clarity that, let's not, among 100 different variables, let's just focus on investment. That's where I'm going to, come to the points that Omkar made. The reforms that we have to do, the next generation, have to actually be focused exactly on investment, on encouraging investment. And I think here's where the labor reforms that Omkar spoken about actually are important. The disinvestment, and I think, his frustration, at basically the execution not being fast enough is something that I think, must be taken on board. These are two critical signals that can go out, which says that, okay, the government really is, and I can tell you that there is clear seriousness on this to push on both of so the bottom line is that it has to be, let's not get cluttered around, and economic systems can create that clutter, but just keep the eyeball on investment and do everything that it takes to actually just encourage investment, and that's the bottom line.
Okay, if that is the bottom line, Mr. Garg, then what needs to be done to get the investment cycle moving again? We've talked about this chicken and egg situation, this virtuous cycle that we're hoping to get started, but what needs to be done? And again, going back to the point that Omkar was making, for 20 plus years, share of manufacturing to GDP has stayed put at 15%. We've had this aspiration of 25% for a decade plus now. So if investment is the number one priority, what is it going to take for us to move on it?
So investment is the key to growth. I think that that cannot be disputed. But how do you get the investment going and moving in the Indian economy is the point. I think besides the broader macro issues, which we sometimes discuss, the labor and land and other kind of reforms, I think we need to now get into very specific sectors and then look at very closely how to do it. Let me illustrate for an example. We have a lot of coal in the country, right? But we require about 1,000 million metric tons of coal every year. We produce only about 600 million tons, right? We import a lot of coal today. What is required to be done to make sure that we produce 1,100 million tons, right? That requires a lot of investment. And how that investment will come, it will not come until the Coal India has the monopoly of investment in the coal, right? Probably what we need to do, in my judgment, is to award coal blocks of 100 million ton annual mining capacity to 5 big
private sector companies.
Yes.
This was the intention. It was a stated objective.
No, point. So this is the way. Now we have a law. We have created a law also where commercial mining is to be permitted. So all that it requires in this sector is to make sure that we award this, right?
So,
that is.
So unless you break the public sector monopolies, the fact that you have a stated policy that allows for the private sector to get in, what will it take to truly get this off the ground?
That is exactly the reform required. Reform is there, but that reform requires implementation, that you need to create 5 blocks of 100 million ton capacity each and award it to the best of the companies in the world with the idea that you should start producing the coal in next 2 years. That's it. So we will need to do, you go through oil and...
You make it sound simple, sir, yet it hasn't happened. My question is, with this political mandate, if it can't happen, then what will make it happen?
So it is that which is required to be done. You go to another sector, oil and gas, railways, roads. Roads, for example, let's take. This was one sector where private investment had started coming in quite a lot. Right? We had the animal spirits running where lots of roads were taken by giving the subsidy to the government rather than taking it. Right? So they were not only funding cost, but over the years, the road situation has changed completely. Today it requires 25 crores to build a kilometer of road. The revenue which comes on the road is less than 1 crore. No private sector will invest in this. We'll have to change the model of road. Right. So what we require in our economy to make investments actually happen is to go by sector, do the analysis, and come out with the appropriate measures and take those decisions to do it. Broader...
Subhash, I just want to add one thing. And this is my last words. One thing that we have to stop, particularly in policy-making decisions, is a phrase which always starts the sentence, which is called "but in a country like India, ... If we stop this "but in a country like India, ... we can think of policies which are obvious, staring at us in the eye,
Yeah.
and stopped by but in a country like India, dot, dot, dot.
Sir, if I
I
may-
would second that. I think this is.
Sorry, can I just add something because I'm dying to say this?
Please go ahead.
We're sitting under the roof of Taj Palace Hotel.
Nice plug, by
We
the
are
way. Go
talking
ahead.
about the coal industry. Let's talk about the tourism industry, the biggest multiplicator of the jobs. Every job created in hotel sector creates 6 to 10 jobs in other sectors.
Yeah.
We have a young population in India.
Yes.
Let's look at the GST of not charging at 100 euros, 28%.
There you go.
No country in the globe is doing it.
Another pitch for a GST rate
I mean,
cut, this
if-
time
if-
from the hotel
If
industry.
for nothing else, as being the only panelist from tourism, let's please support it for a change.
Okay, you have our sympathies.
Exactly. So you have again a tourism sector to think about.
Yeah.
Education sector to think about.
Yeah.
Right. Tourism has amazing. We spend something like 29
Yeah.
billion dollars on the tourist going from India.
Yeah,
We get 1/3 of that in India. We
Yeah.
are a civilization of 5,000 years.
yes,
The kind of tourist experience which we can create for the world is amazing.
yeah,
The number of tourists which come to India are 1/3 of what visit Louvre every year.
yeah.
What are we doing? We can find again that what I was trying to say, that we have to do sector by sector.
And
Yes.
we are making our contribution. We invested heavily to revive the Connaught, which will open in February in this city.
Na-
We created a new destination like Havelock in
We'll
Andaman.
do a whole other forum on tourism. I promise
I must
you.
actually-
But we're unfortunately completely out
Sharon,
of time.
this has
Yes.
to be said actually.
Yes.
I think, the starting and ending with tax, I think, I want to therefore take a place like Gaya, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Bodh Gaya.
Yeah.
Even if you give basically a tax rate cut, if there isn't an airport there actually which enables people to come in,
Yeah.
I think, we basically need to move on beyond these and say, what are those, enablers actually in infrastructure,
Yeah.
and identifying places and say, these are the 50 places where we basically will create the enabling infrastructure.
Right.
I think this sort of extraordinary focus on tax needs to actually move on to other aspects as well.
Okay, needs to move on to other aspects as well. Unfortunately, we're completely out of time. Let me give everyone exactly 10 seconds. Omkar Goswami, 10 seconds. The single biggest priority that we need to focus on, not just in the short term, whether this is structural, cyclical, etc., but to make India find its place in this global reset.
The second generation reforms that have been always spoken about but have never come.
Ditto.
Besides investment, I think let's also focus on the digital economy, which is the future. We have a lot of things to do it. Currently, we are not as good. We have less than 1% of the
Yeah.
global digital economy.
Yeah.
China is 42%. I think we'll have to get our act right in there also.
Yes.
Besides investment.
Okay, Puneet.
Aspiration to be a global leader.
Aspiration to be a global leader. Well, I think a lot of the solutions that we've talked about, a lot of the policy prescription that's been discussed here on the panel is not something new necessarily. These are ideas that we've spoken of, debated for very, very long. I think the question now is, when are we actually going to get a lot of this moving, and how quickly will we finally see the bullet being bitten on some of these ideas as well as policy prescription. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here to talk about the world in 2020 and India's place in it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here this afternoon.
Thank you. I would request you all to please be seated. If the panelists could please be seated, there's a polling which will happen right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, the question that is going to come for you right over here, if you can see, if it continues, the US-China trade war will push the world towards a recession. Please press A if you agree, press B if you disagree, and C if you can't say anything. Once you enter your option, just press it once, leave your voting pad on the table itself, and in 30 seconds, we will come up with our answer. Every session will be followed by a special polling with a question like this. And in 30 seconds, we will get to see the result. If you haven't pressed, please press A for agree, B for disagree, and C for can't say. All right, there you go with the answers. 40.2% agree, 46.08 disagree, and C is 13.73%. Okay. With that being said, let's have a huge round of applause for our esteemed group of panelists, and our moderator would request Mr. Suman Khan Munjal to kindly grace the stage and present a summit memo to the panelists and our moderator. Welcome, sir. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly bear with us. We need 2 minutes to reset for the next session. Kindly do not go anywhere. A humble request to please do not leave your seats. Another minute or so, we are about to start with the next session. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start our next session. All those standing to please be seated. Once again, a humble request to please put your handsets on silent mode or kindly switch them off. Right, ladies and gentlemen, now here we go with our next session, the India story. How do we avoid the middle income trap? This session is sponsored by Tata Capital. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed group of panelists, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, Dr. Ratin Roy, Director, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, NIPFP, Mr. Ramdeo Agarwal, Joint Managing Director, Motilal Oswal Financial Services Limited, and the session will be moderated by Mr. Nilay Verma, Partner and Leader, Markets Enablement, KPMG.
Thank you.
Sir, but before we start, I would request Mr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, and Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, Chairman, Hero Enterprise, to release a report jointly produced by Pehle India Foundation and Mindmine Summit titled India's Course to 2030. Can we have a round of applause? Before we start the session, एक बारी जोरदार तालियां. Let's welcome this session with enthusiasm and zest. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If I could request you to settle down. We have a great session today. We have a very, very eminent panel members. Let me just set the let me just set the context. We want to, and that's the aspiration, India is to be a 5 trillion economy by 2025. That requires growth, not just growth, significant growth. And yet you've got experts talking about structural crisis, which basically means that we may not even have higher single-digit growths. And that's the dilemma, and that's what people are calling as the middle income trap. We also have data, if you just look at about 101 countries which were in middle income in 1960, only 13 could graduate to higher income by 2010, almost 50 years later. Even if you look at 2010 data, 30 of the 38 countries which were in the lower middle income definition continue to be there after 28 years. So clearly there is something important about discussing this, and we've got a great panel. So let me start with you, Dr. Roy. You kind of mainstreamed this discussion on the middle income trap. And I think the point that you've made is that India's growth has been driven by consumption, but that consumption is about 100 million odd people. And with that slowing down, we really have a problem of middle income trap. You said this about 3-4 months back. You've seen the data thereafter. You've also seen the reforms that have been initiated. What's your view on where we are heading now?
Thank you. Well, actually, I've been saying this in slightly less spectacular fashion for the past 3 years. But then nobody listens. You said 4 months. That's a good proof of where we are in this country in policy discourse. I said it on NDTV 4 months ago. And then everybody woke up. Everybody. So, in fact, I was with Mr. Munjal, I think 2 years ago, on a panel where I said the same thing and we agreed. So the problem is not, firstly, something that has arisen in the last 5 years. It is a consequence of the way India has grown since 1991. And I'll explain this to you very simply. In 1988, for a while, I was a lecturer in the Shriram College of Commerce. My salary then was 3,000 rupees a month, mercifully only for 6 months. Then I moved into investment banking. So that's about 36,000 rupees a year. Those days, a Maruti car cost 1.5 lakhs, yeah? An air conditioner cost about 25,000. And a Bombay Delhi air ticket cost 3,000 rupees. So translated to my salary, a car was like 3 years and 8 months salary. An AC was like 9 months salary. And a Bombay Delhi air ticket was 1 month salary. Cut to now, over time. And the same guy, Shriram College of Commerce, entry-level government, 65,000 rupees a month, last I saw. Keeps going up with DA. Okay? That's 8 months to buy a Maruti car, 10 days salary to buy an air conditioner, and a Bombay Delhi air ticket now is less than 1 day's salary for an entry-level person earning that amount. But if you look at stuff that all Indians consume, and I'm not talking about poor Indians, especially people earning the minimum wage or below, then they have not benefited from this change, which is why the leading indicators of Bombay for the past 20 years have been not cycles, two-wheelers, four-wheelers, air conditioners, FMCG, because that's where the domestic demand has been. What I was afraid of, and I'm quite surprised it's come so quickly, may not be, there may be a correlation, it's certainly a warning, is that this music will stop one day, and it does stop. But in India, we have to be particularly conscious of two things, and I'll stop there. One, 100 to 150 million is a bloody big market. So you're not going to see market signals telling you these things are petering out. It's a huge market. As long as the going is good, you'll be happy. Second thing is, India has never been an export-led economy. I'm not talking about future continuous 5 trillion कल होगा, हम export power बनेंगे. ये मैं जिंदगी भर सुनते आ गया हूँ, मैं 52 साल का हूँ. I'm talking about what we have actually done. And in terms of actual doing, we've had phases when our exports have risen, but it's always been a complement to growth. Growth has come from domestic demand. We are not the biggest manufacturer of yellow rubber ducks, China is. Add to that the fact that large sections of things that 100 million produce are actually now being produced by Bangladesh and Vietnam. And you will see why I'm worried. So the solution is very simple. Move to producing at affordable prices, stuff that people earning the minimum wage, or twice the minimum wage, or 3 times the minimum wage can buy. You will easily attain a $5 trillion economy. But you're not going to do it with the leading indicators of Bombay being your guidestone.
Interesting, you spoke about the NDTV interview. In that interview, you also spoke about gave the example of Marks and Spencer shirt of yours, which is about 3,000 rupees, which is typically produced in India, and yet the 400 rupee shirt, which most Indians buy, is produced in Bangladesh, and that's where the challenge is. Is this something that you want to just explain what we really need to do, because that sounds very logical?
Well, you need to, obviously, if you're going to make if you're competitive making 3,000 rupee shirts and you're refusing to make 300 rupee shirts, you've got to look at why. There's a problem with yarn, I won't go into that, but the fundamental also issue is that wage costs in South Gujarat and in Tirupur are much higher than wage costs in Bangladesh or Vietnam. But wage costs in Bihar, UP, Jharkhand, MP are not that high. So you could set up units there. Now I have to ask the private sector, what is the Lakshman Rekha that prevents them from doing what the Tatas did and actually going and setting up units in Bihar, Bengal, and be honest about it. You know, if you don't like those places, say so and tell us what we can do about it. But it's facile to say that we have a wage constraint in areas where there's so many people migrating for a fraction of wages, and there's no skills constraint in textiles, just like gems and jewelry. 15 to 20% of the workforce sitting in Tirupur and sitting in South Gujarat are from Bengal, UP, Bihar. Why can't those people become entrepreneurs? How do we effect that change? That's a key to answering how we complete our development transformation and avoid this middle income trap.
Absolutely. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, if I can come to you. I'm not so sure you agree with whatever has been said so far, given your projections of the way the growth is likely to happen, higher growth. But one thing that even the Prime Minister spoke in the speech on 15th August is about wage disparity, or what he called wealth inequality, or wealth, the wealth creator, and then have to be wealth distribution. There are estimates which suggest that 1% of Indian hold about 73% of wealth in India. Is that something that we really need to address as a policy, as a framework, to be able to address the issues that have been raised?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. What I'm not sure at all whether the issue that you just raised merits any policy attention at all, because I'm not sure that we are going to go after people whom the Prime Minister called the wealth creators and the wealth producers, because I think their role is supreme, their role is principal. They are the main drivers of growth, and I think the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister made it clear, and so have we done in Niti Aayog, that if India will grow, if India will breach the middle income trap or reach the middle income status, it will have to be done on the basis of private enterprise. Now, this is why I also don't tend to agree with what Ratin has just said, because the assumption being made by what Ratin is saying, that if the private enterprise is the driver of growth, then that must necessarily mean inequality in the country. And if you are unequal in the country, and I've spent 10 years in Manila, where I've seen the inequality at various levels, then you cannot get the demand or you cannot get the sustenance that a much broader based economy will have to offer. Because the point is that this is where I think the private enterprise, a robust, dynamic private enterprise, has to work together with a development state which makes its public services, which performs its mandate in the most efficient, transparent manner and without generating rents in the system. Now, this is exactly what this government has done for the last 5 years. I think what Ratin should do now is to go back and look at the fact as to what is the impact of opening 365 million bank accounts in this country. What is the impact of saying that you will have a modernized agriculture in this country? You know, an agriculture sector which employs 43% of your labor and produces about 15 or 16% of GDP is not the basis. That's what you have to modernize, and there is a huge scope for modernizing that. And you know, there is in agro-processing, the growth rate, the capital growth, investment is growing at 1% while it should go at 3% plus more. The last 5 years of this government have been spent precisely in making sure that the benefits of growth reach to the bottom of the pyramid and that everybody gets included in that. Because if you don't, yes, of course, you will get inequalities and you will get, you'll get a constraint where you go. This is therefore now the time, and this is what I've been saying, quite loudly, which is that having done that in the past 5 years, if you now focus on growth, focus on giving the investment up again, focus on getting the right, getting the financial markets right, getting the credit supply right, you will get growth, which will not follow Ruchir Sharma's, example of saying that 5% is the new normal because we can't afford that, which will get you to 7, 8, or 9% per annum, and that will help you, reach the targets of the 5 trillion economy or the rest. Now, all of this, not to say, whether this middle income trap business is at all relevant, because middle income stretches from about $2,500 or $3,000 to $12,000. Now, there's a huge, range there, and I'm not even sure that going forward we really do want to breach that and become a $15,000 economy, the way we live and the way we survive, because the whole model, therefore, has to be rethought here. So my understanding, Nilay, is that we are now in a situation, and there are now some hiccups at this moment, where if we get the short term right, we can get the growth going again, get the engine started again, and working, and we will get the growth that we need for raising this country towards a income level which will be widely distributed, which will have less inequality, and therefore get the country to where it desires to be.
Absolutely, and I will come back to the short-term thing because that's something that people want to talk about, but I think both what you and Dr. Roy said is about the private sector. Everybody agrees that the private sector has to drive the growth, and that's where I'll come to you, Mr. Ramdeo. We've been discussing just a while back, you said that, look, many of the things that we need to do are rather simple. You spoke about the fact that government and private sector need to speak to each other more. You speak to 200 people every day in your business and you have the feedback. You also spoke about the fact that the value flow has to improve. I think that's really important, but can you just expand on that?
Good afternoon, friends. It's a pleasure to be here amongst all of you. Different crowd here. A lot of bureaucrats, a lot of people who matter in the decision making. One of the things I find because I'm a stock market guy, I'm not economist, and we can't give very intelligent arguments, but we are in touch with the reality. And reality is far away from all these concepts of middle income trap and whole lot of things. The problems on the ground is very real. And if somebody from Delhi goes and listens to 100, 200 guys actually in Faridabad and all here itself, because the problems of the businesses are no different in Delhi than in Mumbai and Bangalore or anywhere you go. It's the same problems. If you note down, there won't be more than 8 or 10 problems. But nobody is willing to look at that and get into bigger concepts and address those things. So the problem in the economy of the growth actually started surfacing post-ILFS crisis last year in July, August. And basically the economy runs on credit flow. And the plumbing of the credit flow is destroyed in last 12 months. And it is getting destroyed by the day, you know. And center of the problem, I mean, to little my understanding, what I see there is, if you see the company after company, from hero to zero, you know, that kind of, I mean, I have not seen in my 40 years career in the stock market, where wealth destruction of large corporates of 80,000, 100,000 crores becoming zero in 6 months, 8 months time. This is a shocking period we are living. And one of the culprit is the credit flow, plumbing is the credit flow. And it is not to do with the government. I'm not blaming the government, but government's problem is everybody's problem. And government is the one who can solve a lot of problems. Because when a DHFL defaults for a day, he is bankrupt. When government defaults for 60 days and 100 days, there is nothing happens. Today, the biggest defaulter in the economy is government. And I think, yeah. Rajivji, just listen to the, you know, what they're saying. So I think one thing government can do without doing anything is take some overdraft from RBI. They can print as much as they want. And at least start paying 30 days bill on 30 days. That is the least they can do. I am telling you, at least 1/3 of the economic problem today will be sorted, if not more. So like that, if we start moving one by one. And see, one of the things is that we want to grow at Chinese pace, but we don't have a we cannot work like Chinese. We have a Western growth model or no model. How do we grow at Chinese rate? We have to have Indian growth model to grow at Indian pace. And what is that Indian growth model? Nobody knows. There is a discussion. I mean, see, if I want to become chartered accountant, I have to have my own strategy to become chartered accountant. I'm not a brilliant guy. I cannot go and go to an exam and pass it. So I have to have my own strategy. I have to change my handwriting. I have to do a lot of things. So like that, India has to struggle his way to get to that see, one of the best things Prime Minister has done is he has set a goal. Now we have to find a clear Indian strategy to reach there. I mean,
I wanted to agree with you, but I just want to point out that, are you saying that this is the only government that has started defaulting or not paying your bills on time? यूपीए एकदम टाइम पे देता था, एनडीए 1 टाइम पे देता था, या ज्यादा टाइम पे नहीं आ रहा अभी? बहुत लंबा हो गया डिले पहले के मुकाबले। पूछ रहा हूं आपसे, बताइए, आप अधिकारी बैठे हैं, बताइए फिर बताइए कि इस सरकार की खास ये प्रॉब्लम है, बताइए अगर है तो। नहीं है ना?
No. Let me now tell you, okay? Because you're not pointing anybody. I'm meeting a lot of guys. They are saying they're supplying to defense, and for last 6 to 8, listen.
My question is, 2011 में ये होता था ये और
अभी बहुत बड़ा problem है.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a much bigger problem now. And right now, there is a liquidity crisis. So when there is one crisis, somebody can pay, he must pay.
No.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the problem was never there. B2G, business with government, was always a problem. It was not valuable in the stock market. But today, it has become worst. I'm looking at private equity deal. Let me tell you, the only problem with that company is that his 100% of the business or 80% of business is dependent on state and central government. And one of the state government has not paid for last 6 months.
Sure. So let me just come back to this, Dr. Rajiv, if I can come back to you. You've said we have, and everybody agrees, there's strong fundamental of the Indian economy. You've also spoke about the fact we should be back to 8% plus growth by FY 2021. The question is, given the slowdown and the kind of questions that have been raised, real estate is another sector that people are talking about. What do we need to do now? Because that, in many senses, would define how we move forward.
No, for me, it's very clear that this problem started with the financial sector. And the current problem, when you get a problem which starts in the financial sector, it has a very nasty habit of getting out of hand very quickly. It sort of keeps exploding, going on. But this problem in the financial sector hasn't started, Ramdev said about ILFS and so on. Yes, that was what precipitated it. But the problem, in my view, started really between 2004 to 2011, when there was a punch bowl was out there in the market, and the credit growth was 27%, to non-food, to non-agricultural sector, and the banks was rushing in money to everybody concerned, so that when this government came into office 2014, they inherited a non-performing assets of about 8.5 lakh crore and rising at that point in time. And still many projects to which they were been lent in the infrastructure, power, etc., becoming unviable over time and so on. Now, why am I going back to that level is because when you have a banking system which grows at, which is now in a sharp decline, which is what happened between after 2014 to 2000, in fact, started in 2012 really, when it started declining and the credit growth started declining, then somebody had to take its place, and which were the NBFCs. And in between 2014 to 2018, NBFCs grew at about 25% per annum. And their balance sheets expanded. They were small to begin with, but so therefore not the big impact. But they just expanded, hugely. Now, in a situation like that, when something like ILFS happens, then you just, as Ramdev said, the plumbing gets, sort of completely blocked. And this is exactly what happened, because the agents which were supplying or which were shoring up the demand, the consumption demand, suddenly sort of bent kaput, as it were. And therefore, and the investment demand had already come, unstuck because of all that had happened in the infrastructure sector. Since 14 to 18, there's been no PPP projects. It's all been done by EPCs, etc., because no private sector has the balance sheet or has the guts, has the resources to come and invest in the infrastructure sector. Now, therefore, if we and the government recognizes this, absolutely, that the problem is in the financial sector, liquidity is turning into insolvency, and therefore you got to stop that, and you got to have that. And this is what we have been discussing in many ways. Now, the issue is that this is, and I hope this is an unprecedented situation for a government of India from the last 70 years. We've not faced this sort of a liquidity, sort of situation where the entire financial sector is up in a churn, and nobody is trusting anybody else. It's not just the government and the private sector. Within the private sector, nobody wants to lend to anybody else. Everybody is sitting on, on cash, but they will not move, etc. So there are two issues here. One, that you may have to take steps which are out of the ordinary, and these steps, and the government, it takes a lot for a government, which is inherited and which has got all the systems and the inertia, etc., to try and think that and go there. I mean, ours is not a system where we are encouraged to take risks. It's just the opposite. It's, that we are encouraged to be as conservative as possible. That's the first point. The second point is that I think the government must do whatever it can to take away some of the apprehensions of the private sector, and because there is that element as well, which is that now here, and I'll just end by saying, because I don't want to detail much, the whole nature of the game has changed in the last 4 years. Nature of the game has changed, after demonetization, after GST, after IBC, etc., etc. The earlier period where you had a 10, 20, 30, 35% of cash sloshing around, which used to help people, that's become much less. That's one. And the other side is that the businesses, which earlier assumed that the downside risks were all to be borne by the financial sector, by the banking sector, now are faced with a situation that they have to be party to that, and it's not just the upside risk that they take. So all of this put together means that it's a fairly complex situation. So therefore there are some easy answers, of course, and I completely agree with Ramdev. I mean, I have no hesitation in saying that there is no business of the government to hold back payments which are due to the people, because that then has a domino effect all over the place. So I mean, I've said this inside the government, and I'm saying it here, so that every department which owes, and this is, by the way, this is being at the moment, there's a huge effort at the moment to try and get this sorted out and try and get this out of the way. In fact, Niti Aayog also had, and I'll just one example and I'll end. We had a mandate to say that every contract, every case which is up in the courts, please pay 75% of the value if the case has been won. If the first decision is in the favor of the private sector, what we find is that we did settle some of those cases, that for the rest, the requirement was that you pay 75% of the due, but also the interest payments. Now and you want a bank guarantee for it. Now the banks will not give you a guarantee for the interest part of it, so it got stuck. So there are these very sort of specific things which are happening, but I assure you that the government is prepared and will do this, and you will see this happening, that at least they are not reneging on the dues that they are there to the payment, and this will be done as very soon as far as I can make out.
We really look forward to that. Before I open up the questions to the audience, Dr. Roy, if I can just come back to you. Clearly, financial services and liquidity is a short-term or is a concern area. But you've also spoken about, in the context of structural changes, investing in healthcare, education, and the fact that, especially if you look at countries like Poland, which are seen as example of having avoided it, looking at innovation and wages. Is that an area that we really need to invest and look at from a long-term perspective?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, yes. Everything that he said, and everything that he said is true. But when you say that you're fixing the problem now, I mean, I'm going to take the government, I'm going to disagree with Rajiv. Of course, he can't agree with me on this. I'm going to take the government ecosystem as given. Because if you're not paying bills 5 years ago and you're waking up to that fact now, then I'm going to obviously discount the assurance that you're going to start paying bills on time next year. Because I think the problem is worse than sitting in Delhi and, Sultanate pe baith ke niche jao. Orders don't transmit in India. And I'm not blaming the government for this. We have a weak structure in government. Nobody wants to reform it. Nobody wants to reform public administration. When you don't reform public administration, when you have discretion everywhere, you have these problems. I have not seen one word from any government in this country, except I think once Manmohan Singh mumbled something for a month, and then he gave up, about reforming this giant behemoth called the Government of India or the governments of India. When you have reforms happening, especially you see them in the states, then you do see efficiency working. So my point is this is not about inequality. I'm putting a very simple private, I'm from Bombay, okay, I'm not from Delhi, so I'm not a government type. I'm putting a very simple private sector proposition to you. Do you or do you not think that the 350 million people in this country who earn 1x to 3x the minimum wage, baki bhul jao, garib hai, should be able to buy without subsidy a decent meal, clothing produced in India, one house paying EMI in their lifetime, no subsidy, decent healthcare package, decent education. You are talking about an India model. Here's my India model for you. ये 5 चीजों पे आप shift करें. Let these become leading indicators of the Indian economy, along with the ancillaries that come with it. Then you will see more sales of cycles, slowly two-wheelers, slowly four-wheelers. You won't start with four-wheelers and then go down to cycles, right? Then you will have a different India, which will grow at a highly accelerated pace just because more people will be included in the business process of producing stuff and therefore being able to demand it. आजकल क्या हो रहा है? You have essentially a compensatory state. I'm so sorry you're poor, you can't afford something, ये subsidy ले लो, खाना खरीद लो. This is all nothing to do with BJP or Congress or anything like that, What was Nyay? Nyay was, I'm sorry you're poor, here's an apology like a hotel manager, कि आपका AC काम नहीं कर रहा है, तो ये थोड़ा सा पैसे ले लीजिए. कम से कम the Kisan scheme at least solved an immediate problem of the farmer. But if we don't move there, where 500, 600 million Indians, or okay, give me half of that, 300 million, but not 100 million Indians are not forming the bedrock of our growth, you will not see exports grow. The history of exports in India, software chodo, our big export pride I have is pharma. Why were we good at producing pharma? Why were we good at producing certain kinds of transport equipment? Because we could sell to the common man. And when India can sell to the common man, it can knock the rest of the world out of business. You want to beat China on exports? Forget Bangladesh. Produce at affordable prices for 350 million Indians, and you will get all these goals. But to do that, we will have to make structural shifts. So while this credit squeeze and all that is temporary and can be dealt with, I do not think that it represents just a hiccup. कि वो बहुत ज़्यादा investment हो गया था. बहुत ज़्यादा investment क्यों हुआ था? In way too few a place. And as you were saying, there was a lot of rent seeking associated with because the club was small. So inclusive growth, and I think the Prime Minister, I'll stop with that, has made two very important paradigm shifts, which we should pay attention to. One is we have stopped talking about maximizing agricultural output. We are talking about doubling farmers' income. Now that's a project I love. I'm not able to get money for this. People will give me money to work on G20. I need 1.5 crore rupees to figure out 30,000, 40,000 farmer balance sheets, profit and loss accounts, funds flow statement. Let me understand the farming business as a business here, instead of talking in the air. And let me find out, what is a viable farm, in which agroclimatic region, and then we invest in it. So this doubling farmers' income lets us do that. I think Niti had an excellent task force on doubling farmers' income. They're great recommendations, but to carry it forward, we'll have to change the mindset of the Ministry of Agriculture and of Bombay sitting here. You have to look at agriculture as a business which you can invest in. Other is affordable housing. I love that word affordable, not low cost. Affordable means मेरी कमाई से मैं एक घर EMI देके जैसे हम सब करते हैं खरीदूंगा. If we can do that with 15 to 20 million houses a year, using the biggest vacant asset government has. Government has two things. Government is the biggest landowner in India, and government is the biggest equity owner in India. Equity पर नहीं जाऊंगा. You want to unlock value, unlock the equity and land values in government, and you will get 9% growth. You will get a $5 trillion economy, but an economy that is broad-based and based on the aspirations and demands of at least 1/3 of the population and not 10% of the population. That is the India model.
रतिन, इसमें जो है ना वो आपको मेरे ख्याल में I hope it's clear to you, ये बात बहुत कि prior to this government in 2014, I don't think anybody paid as much attention to the raising the purchasing power and applying the services and making it possible for that third that you're talking about, by doing all kinds of things that they've done. The effort to have inclusive growth has been the biggest effort for the last 5 years than ever before. For example, Ayushman Bharat. Now, what does Ayushman Bharat do? It creates purchasing power for 500 million people, for 100 million families, at the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 levels, where we hope, therefore, there will be a supply response from the medical, health providers. It has done the same thing with affordable housing. It has done the same thing, with the opening the bank accounts. It has done the same thing with your loans, the Mudra loans, etc., etc. So, hello, and I'll just end there. The criticism, if it has to be made on decades of lack of attention and only rhetoric before that. And this, what has been done in the past 5 years, I am saying simply, has now laid the foundation for a rapid, inclusive, and much more sustainable growth, and also cleaner growth than what has been done ever before. We have a hiccup at the moment, we'll get over it, and then we will see the economy going forward at a much rapid pace and on a sustained basis than what you've had in the past.
You have my best wishes. We'll work with you to do that. But this is still the future continuous tense.
Absolutely. In that agreement, let me open this up to the audience. We do have about 4 minutes. A couple of questions we can take. So if you have a question, do raise your hand and somebody would be there. Yeah.
My name is Sunil, and I'm CEO with the affordable housing finance company named Money Bhavanam Home Finance. My question is to Mr. Rajiv Kumar. Now we know that the economy is in dire straits, and I fully agree with Mr. Ramdev Agrawal. I mean, you look at all the data, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, the core industry growth is 0.2 versus about 8% last year. The worst part is government has been turning a blind eye for last 1 year to all the analysts, all the economists, all the newspapers, and industry stalwarts like Mr. Ramdev Agrawal, who have been sharing this from time to time. Even now, what government is doing is very, very superficial. They're just scratching the surface. They're not addressing the real problem. And which is, the strangulating of the 10,000 NBFCs and 100 HFCs. Only 5% of them are AA+, and today PSU banks are lending to only AA+. Now these NBFCs and HFCs, have almost 39% market share in distributing credit to, in the economy and to those who don't have access to, PSU banks. I'll just take one more second to elaborate my questions. Now, by funding to only AA+, the government is further, increasing concentration risk and, leveraging these banks much more. If you fund 10,000 NBFCs, you diversify your risk, and these NBFCs are in different segments of the country, different parts of the country, and the banks have lesser risk. Just one more point, if banks analyze the portfolio, NBFCs and HFCs is one segment where the NPAs are the lowest, and they have been driving the growth in the economy for the last 25 odd years. Why is it that government is just turning a blind eye even now? And the earlier session also, the chief economist, and they are not agreeing, So what is your response to this?
Yeah, I think the question is more on the, I think the partial guarantee scheme which was recently launched wherein AA plus is the basic requirement.
You know, the point is well taken about the NBFCs and, and they being the sort of prime drivers of consumption demand, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is that you have to find modalities, you have to find tools for getting them the credit that you're talking about. Now, the government has tried in this budget to announce the 1 lakh crore, whereby the banks which pick up stakes in the NBFCs will be guaranteed up to 10% of their loss, the credit loss. We need to, as I said earlier, and let me end there, this is a unprecedented situation in our economy, and we have not, we've not grappled with this before. We are trying to grapple with this. We will come up with solutions. Some of that has already happened in the budget. The rest, as far as I can make out, the banks, by the way, have been, they have prevented, you must remember, they have prevented any NBFC from going belly up. Now, nearly something like 2.5 lakh crore of funds have been diverted to the NBFCs. Yes, they have resulted also in the banks picking up the assets from the NBFCs, so the balance sheet sides have reduced. But nonetheless, they have prevented any mortality since the ILFS times, when many were expected. So the government is cognizant of this. The government the government knows that there is an issue here, but you have to find out the effective modalities to be able to do what you're trying to suggest.
Sure. Just one last question before we end the session, and I would request if you can make it very, very brief.
My name is Arun Jagat Ramka. I would like to point out that we are all grappling with the issue of the economy, but the issue is a structural issue. The basic structure, the way we have done business in India for 60, 70 years, chalta hai attitude, that is changing in last 5 years. But without a transition phase, we are stuck in a space where nobody knows what to do. Because the way business was being done, over-invoicing and all the wrong things that were being done, suddenly with online digitization and with proper direction from the top, from the government, you can do without those things with GST and all these things. But without the transition provision, while corruption at the top is not there today, corruption in the ground level has multiplied manifold, which even the finance minister has been addressing in last few weeks with a direction to the tax officials to be sensitive, not to terrorize. It's not just income tax. It is in every law. The commercial laws in the country has been criminalized to an extent that we are not doing business in India, but we are doing business in a penal code.
No, I think your point is extremely well taken, and which is what I implied by saying that the rules of the game have changed.
Correct.
And this is not being recognized, and only being recognized quite slowly. I think what we need to do is to have a much closer, much more, much sort of better engagement between the government and the private sector at this point of time, so that the dialogue is there, because in the changed rules of the game, you have to again create a feeling of trust with each other. And that's somehow kind of broken down. So this dialogue, this engagement, I think is a necessity today. But at the same time, it must be said that this transition that you're talking about, this transition is taking place, but so far in India without a blueprint going forward. We in Niti Aayog are trying to do that, I can assure you. And I think the Prime Minister himself on the 15th of August and also later on has talked about the fact that we have to identify 100 things which will make the ease of living better for the common Indian. We have to identify, half a dozen or a dozen things which will, reduce the criminalization in the commercial activity, etc. And believe you me that we are grappling with it, we are doing it. It just takes time. But as Ramdev Saab said, which is very true, time is very precious at the moment. Because when things start in the financial sector, they tend to explode and implode much faster than whenever otherwise. But nonetheless, we are trying, and I'm sure, I am convinced that we will succeed.
Just one small suggestion. No, I fully agree with Mr. Rajiv Kumar what he said. We have full faith in the current government as well as Niti Aayog, what we are doing on the blueprint. Just for a transition phase, what we need to do, you put a 3, 4 or maximum 5-year limitation on the powers of investigative agencies and the tax officials to question people. Don't question people before the date of demonetization or maybe before May 14. And you will find most businesses, at least 70-80% of them, above the line where they are fully honest.
Sure. Thank you so much.
And that will reduce corruption at the ground level and take the country forward in the first march.
Thank you so much. We are, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to use this
Yeah.
forum to convey one more message that we have a tradition of saying Atithi Devo Bhava, but when it comes to investors, it is a Rakshaso Bhava. You know, I mean, look at the way investors are being treated. And we want all the investments in the world. Half the worlds are going below zero in terms of bond and everything. There's a $22-23 trillion of savings. We need very little. Let's seize this opportunity. I don't have suggestions, but I'm telling you this is amazing. If you treat somebody well, he will come.
Sure.
We are stuck here, but foreigners will also come.
Sure.
And they will come in droves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please create unlevel playing field. We have to be the most attractive market to come here. I believe even the visa you give to US guys, it is not a multi-entry visa. He cannot come back in 7 days from going somewhere. He has to come only after 30 days. So I think we need to create unlevel playing field for the foreign investors. They have tons of money. I mean, we need not even 0.00001% of that money.
Sure.
Please.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to conclude by saying simple thing. I think there's a huge recognition. I've personally worked with a lot of government department. I think there's a clear recognition that we need to do. And I think what you've said is we expect more to happen. And with that optimistic note, we'll close the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on to the polling. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have a question right here for this session. Let's have the question, please. India will struggle to reach 8 to 9% growth in the new decade. Those who agree, please press A. Those who disagree, press B. If you can't say anything, please press C. Once you've put in your option chosen, kindly keep the pad on the table. It just takes one push, that's about it. India will struggle to reach 8 to 9% growth in the new decade. A, agree, B, disagree, and C, can't say. 30 seconds is what you have as a time limit. And ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments, there we go. 37.5 agree, 50% disagree, 12.5% can't say anything. All right. With that being said, I would request Mr. Deepak Prem Naranji to kindly grace the stage and present a memento to our esteemed group of panelists. Can we have a round of applause for sir? We can do with a little bit of round of applause. Big thank you to all our panelists. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break for lunch. It's a 45-minute lunch break. And right after that, we have a very interesting session. Please stay back after the lunch. 45 minutes is what we have for lunch break. Kindly enjoy the lunch. Thank you.